Hello, everyone. It is the latest episode of Time to Head North, and it's going to be a somber one. Want to throw that out there. In light of the school shooting in Texas, we saw 19 kids perish. We wanted to have an open dialogue, not only about the sentiments, the facts, but what can we do? Because everyone, right, says we need to do something, but it's often vapid without real solutions presented. So the North Group collectively wanted to hold this conversation to talk about what we can actually put in place, the steps we can take to try to mitigate school violence in the future. So a little bit of introductions here for those of you listening. I'm Natasha Ryan. I head up communications and business development for the North Group. I have Vincent Vargas here with me. Vince also is business development, and you might recognize him from Minds MC. He's a star of the show. We have Nate Von Ohl. Nate, you want to give your background a little bit for everyone listening, please?
I've been on the show before. I was a SEAL, and then from there retired in the reserves as a Navy SEAL. Was on the Riverside County Sheriff's Department on our full-time SWAT team, crossed one as a U.S. Marshal, and then a business entrepreneur, and have done security and a bunch of other kind of global activities since then. And now I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the North Group.
All right. Thanks, Nate. And we're going to go down below to our CEO, Steve. You want to give a brief background, Steve?
Yeah, Steve Hernandez. I was in the infantry in the U.S. Army, and then after that, got into the security field, did an array of different high-low threat operations in supporting corporate security, private security, and private client security, as well as been involved in law enforcement now for a number of years in and out. Currently sworn in the state of Louisiana as a deputy sheriff, and a reserve up here in Michigan with another agency. Entrepreneur by heart now. Less security, more entrepreneur, but obviously my passion is in the national security space and helping mitigate risk across the globe.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. And Jake?
Yeah, so Jake Hauser here, senior analyst for the North Group, came from SOCOM, primarily a military intelligence type of guy, and was an expert, worked with HSI, CBP, FBI, and et cetera.
All right. And thank you, everyone, for your service here. Everyone here served. So everyone has that need and want, right, along with TNG's mission to truly make this world a safer, better place. And I drive that home because we all feel it. We all believe it. So let's predicate that here, right? It was absolutely horrific. We're all parents. We watched the agony and we're all frustrated. So I want to kick this off because Steve, this was actually your idea. You wanted to hold this video. So I want you to open this and tell us why you want to do this, what you want to accomplish in this video today.
Well, I mean, first off, my hat's off, obviously, to law enforcement, and my heart's out to the families affected by this another horrific incident, being portrayed on innocent life here. We have collectively all spent our time running towards protecting those that couldn't protect themselves. I feel, and I'm willing to get behind the statement 100%, that this isn't a law enforcement problem. This is a data problem. This is how we tackle information and pre-incident indicators and pre-incident data. Most criminal enterprises and even lone wolf actors do express intent early on. It's just a matter of how you look at that, right? And how you look at that intent. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about cataloging data, and then how intelligence can drive mitigation here, as well as documentation and supporting infrastructure within district schools in coordination with law enforcement once it becomes criminal activity related. That's one thing we're going to talk about. The other thing I want to talk about, not that I want to make this political at all, but the median salary for a school resource officer is $70,000. And we just put $40 million towards Ukraine, and God willing, they need it, right? And we've put, I mean, if I look at appropes and what's going out through appropriations from the federal government, fiscal year 2022, 2023, and we start looking at that, I mean, there is money there. $40 million, not to say that we shouldn't be helping the Ukrainian people. They need help. They're dealing with a horrific situation. But if I take a medium salary of a school resource officer at $70,000 a year, and I take 50 million, 40 million, whatever the number is, $40 million, that would be 98,469 schools that could be outfitted with an armed school resource officer, and would ultimately give a budget of $406,219.22 per school, based off of the 2018 public school numbers of 98,469. So again, I don't want to belabor that point. I just think that a good guy with a gun or a good woman with a gun will stop a bad guy or a bad woman with a gun any day of the week, right? So we know that. Now, moving away from that, because again, we're talking about response, which is what we've all done for years. And some of us are very, very well versed in the tactical active shooter response. We've taught it, we've trained it, we've eat, breathe, and slept it. I want to have a different conversation. We know that's an issue. We know there's a budget need there. We know that security in schools is needed. But more importantly, I want to talk about right of bang, left of bang scenarios here. I want to talk about pre-incident indicators. I want to talk about
define all of that when you talk about it, because we might have a listener that's never heard those terms before. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Nate jump into that in a minute. I'm just gonna real quick here. And then I want to cover how before pre-incident engagement with law enforcement, what we see as a program we're working on can be implemented to help people identify through situational awareness training behavioral anomalies that ultimately detect adverse activity or growing adverse activity within a student, a parent, a faculty member. And this isn't just for schools. I mean, this could be training for anyone in the workplace, but we're focused on schools because here at the North Group, we're focused on changing the world and preservation of life. That's our mission. And we fought really hard to maintain that mission and grow that mission. So I'm going to let Nate and Rocco kind of open up on left of bang, right of bang ideologies and kind of how the differences correlated between the two of those and how the intelligence and the data can really work to bring law enforcement on the X pre-incident based on a number of facts for increased threat ratios that are occurring within an ecosystem. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah. And I think just to define, left of bang, right of bang, as you're reading right to left, bang being the incident, left of bang is any precursors that Steve's talking about that could have mitigated the actual problem, i.e. the bang. And then right of bang is, this is what we missed. This is the debrief of like, we should have done this. We should have, could have, would have. And so to kind of, it is, and that's exactly what Steve's talking about. When you're looking at left of bang, that's what everybody is trying to define and kind of, all right, here's the pre-indicator signs of somebody that might have some issues, because all of the profiles, and when I say profiles, and profiling is a horrific word these days, but it is what it is. I don't care if you call it an algorithm or what you give it. But the profile are very, very similar to all of the suspects and shooters for a lot of these horrific incidents. It's isolation. It's family issues. It's, when I say isolation, there's no more friends in there. They're now interested in, guns, ammo, all of a sudden shooting, wanting to go to the range, and this is just out of the blue. And then the next thing you know, this happens, and there's a lot more to that. And just to go into regress, Steve, I think you said 40 million for Ukraine efforts is 40 billion for that package as well. So I'm your COO. That's what I do. So
Thank you for that. You're right. I took 3 zeros off. I don't know what I'd do without you.
A lot more school resource officers.
This is why I'm not the controller.
No worries whatsoever. But no. So left of bang, I think, is what we're not necessarily concentrating on, because we see these indicators, and every time, when you go right of bang now, hey, we should have seen this. This is every shooting, every 6 months. We should have noticed this. We should have. But who the hell do you talk to if you do see the indicators? What's the outlet? What am I calling, the law enforcement or the FBI? If I'm a school kid and we've been trained in this, who do I talk to? The counselor? And then what? And so that's kind of where, to segue into, Rocco, what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
yeah, it's funny because if you see a kid that has bruises, the first thing you do is you make a comment to a counselor, and the counselor probably calls CPS, and they do their investigation. There's nothing like that in the mental health space where you're going to give pre-incident indicators or early signs of like, hey, maybe we should get them into a counselor, and we should at least evaluate and determine whether there needs to be more focus on this certain individual. If we had something like that, it would be a lot of the left of bang, right? We would be able to say, hey, this kid is showing these signs of alienation from the group. We've heard rumors of being bullied. So that's always an indicator like, oh man, that's not a good thing, right? All these little things like that, like those are the guys, or people follow on social media, he's making weird comments or she's making weird gestures, whatever.
Every time, right. Social media is a warning.
Right. And so if there was a place where the kids can contact and then they do a further investigation, I say investigation, really just kind of like you'd introduce a psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever, to do an evaluation saying, all right, where on that spectrum of should we be looking closely into? And then where is the next step? If they're showing all the signs, what are you going to call the cops? Say, hey, we think this kid has a potential to be an active shooter. Like that, nothing exists like that. And also, what's too crazy to jump into, right? Call the FBI. And so that's the hard thing. We don't have a system set up for the precursors to an event like this. And that's something we should probably look into.
I think speaking to that, from a teacher perspective and the way society is too, I think there needs to be some level of protection for the reporting. So a teacher doesn't get in trouble or labeled for reporting or pointing out a student. Oh, she's profiling or she's attacking my child. Like, I think there needs to be some level of protection for the person reporting too, so that teachers feel safe to say, hey, this kid is a problem. The signs are here. But again, Vince, you got to have someone to report to.
Right. There is no. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
No, go on, Vince.
So, yeah, there is no. We go into a doctor's office and the kids, they ask my son, all right, which one of these faces do you feel like, from sad to happy? Right. Those are just initial identifiers of how they're feeling, emotionally at the moment. Right. And so maybe there's something that when a kid comes into a homeroom, they're filling out this kind of psychological kind of evaluation for the day, and those kids that feel a certain way would say, oh, I'm not doing it today, whatever the case. But we need to implement a system that is the precursor to any kind of major event. And we have nothing in place. And this is just minor stuff, but that's a super quick something that we can try and add to the day-to-day things that go on in school.
Early on. Yes.
Yep.
So I'd like to just talk through some data real quick, and I'm going to read here from my top screen, but it's really important because my brain is never going to memorize all of this. But we're all familiar with Columbine. Columbine changed entry tactics, it changed protocols, it changed a lot. But this is nothing new. Active aggressor scenarios have been around since the beginning of man, right? So, but one of the first incidences that we documented going back to May of '98 in Springfield, Oregon, was a student angry about expulsion. Now, mind you, this is a year before, I would say 11 months before Columbine happened. The student was angered about an upcoming expulsion hearing and showed up at the school, 4 dead, murdered his parents, drove to the school, opened fire on the porch in the cafeteria, 4 dead, 25 wounded, suspect apprehended by students. Okay. Then you have, it gets even crazier. Then you have Columbine as kind of the next incident, if you will, that's mentioned here. And then after Columbine, everybody remembers Columbine. Like we could never forget that one. That one was Dylan Roof and the other kid. Just absolutely horrible people. 13 dead, 21 wounded. And we could talk active shooters all day. I want to stay on schools here, but you go down and it continues, right? I've got, so that May of 98 shooting is number one on my list. I've got another 245 all the way up to the Robb Elementary incident from 3 days ago. So a lot of these I know we've determined are gang related. Each day, it's estimated that 8 children die from gun violence in America. Another 32 are shot or injured. And that's, the CDC assesses on 128.19. Those stats are from the U.S. has had 1,316 school shootings since 1970. And these numbers are increasing. 18% of school shootings have taken place since the tragedy at Sandy Hook. Let me read that again. The U.S. has had 1,316 school shootings since 1970, estimated, and that's from trace.org. And these number of shootings are increasing. 18% of school shootings have taken place since the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary. I mean, that's crazy, right? Now, in a comparison study of school shootings from 1974 to 2000 conducted by the Secret Service and Department of Education, and this is actually, I've read this, 93% of school shooters plan the attack in advance. Okay. And that's something we're going to come back to and focus on here. In 4 out of 5 school shootings, at least one other person had knowledge of the attacker's plan, but failed to report it. That was from Silverman, J. Simmons, A, and Cron S, I believe is a law firm, or some sort of think tank. But they're accredited here with having said that. A study found that 70% of active shooters spent a week or longer planning. Right? Now, this next statistic is pretty staggering. The majority of individuals with diagnosed mental illness do not engage in violence of others. And that was the Medical Director Institute in 2019. The majority of individuals with diagnosed mental illness do not engage in violence against others. So, my thoughts on this, having spent, I believe, a lot of time dealing with threats, behavioral anomalies, behavioral detection, threat management, if you will. I believe that we are policy-wise going after building safety, to try to harden schools, which is, to me, it's a tertiary item on the list of importance. Mental health, we've been having this conversation for 20 plus years. If we follow MICE, money, ideology, coercion, and ego of what motivates actors to do things, this is ideologically related, which is the worst case scenario. You're dealing with radical extremism, left, right, wherever in the world it exists. When you're dealing with an ideology, it's not necessarily a mental illness. It's learned and taught behavior that might be fueled by mental illness. But a lot of ill ideology, based groups will target people with bad kind of states of mind. right? We saw this in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've seen this with suicide bombers. We've seen this with different far right leaning activist groups. They target people that have certain ideologies or certain mental breakdowns, and then that creates a recipe for disaster. Now, moving away from that, the number of school shootings has increased every decade. 1970 to 1979, we had 163. 1980 to 1989, we had 218. 1990 to 99, we had 265. 2000 to 2009, 353 reported by Statistica here. And then, or however you say this, the Center for Homeland Defense and Security K through 12 shooting database. And then real quick, Rocco, 2010 to 2019, 426 shootings.
Steve, what would you say is the reason why? I have a few ideas of why it's growing so much.
Yeah, so I wanna cover that, but give me 1 second, because I want to just run through this. Let's table that for 1 second. So behavioral analysis, right? According to the FBI's behavioral analysis unit, there is no one size fits all profile for a school shooter. So that's leading into answering that question. While impulse attacks do occur, there are exponentially rare. They are exponentially rare in comparison to planned shootings. Okay. So, and the other point I want to make on behavioral analysis here is every individual school shooter has motivations that differ from one another, but they do share common motives: revenge, desire for dominance, and aspirations of notoriety. Revenge is very important because it'll kind of answer your question here as we go down this. Revenge, desire for dominance, and aspirations of notoriety. Okay, so now descriptive statistics here. 37% of attackers exhibited an interest in violence in their own writings, poems, essays, and social media posts or other communication methodologies where they shared with students. Very, very, very important to the increase in violence that we're going to discuss here in a minute. 63% of attacks occurred during the school day. Why not? Wouldn't make sense to show up when no one's there. 68% acquire the weapons used from their home of residence or a known relative. 68% acquire the weapons used from their home of residence or known relative. Very important. And you guys know my stance on this. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not the road we need to go down. You guys know where I'm coming from on that. 93% of attacks were planned in advance. That is a very staggering number that we need to discuss. 93% of attackers engage in behavior prior to the attack that caused others to be concerned, i.e. trigger events. Very, very, very important. Very important that we talk about that. 95% of attackers were current students. So there is a number of very heinous attacks that have occurred with that 5% that weren't students, i.e. Sandy Hook. He was not a student at that elementary when he showed up there. His mother was a teacher. So that is what I would call an anomaly incident that requires further investigation, and then goes back to, and hold on, I'm almost done with this. 24% of attackers were motivated by recognition. 27% of attackers were motivated by suicidal ideations or depression. Again, coming back to this comparison between mental illness and the need to deal with that is not statistically sound. It's not a mental illness problem. There's no way for us to tackle that as a sole source issue with this based on the current statistics I'm reading right now, unless these are wrong, and I believe in the people that collected them. 34% of attackers were motivated by attempts to solve a problem. Very important. 61% of attackers were motivated by desire for revenge. Okay, very important, very important. And then number 11 is 75% of attackers felt threatened or persecuted by others. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to cover real quick before I open it up here, potential warning signs. 1, significant personal loss, humiliation, or setbacks that either are real or perceived. Contextually, number 2, contextually inappropriate and dramatic change in appearance. We saw that with Dylan Roof and the other shooter in Columbine. They had this goth perception. Now they started to dress trench coats, walking around, filming it. There was a clear change in ideology. Number 3, abrupt and unexplained sensations in the use of alcohol, drugs, medications, described as numbing or cleansing, purifying. That to me is another big issue, because I feel like the war on youth-based drugs is something that we're not fighting enough, and I think it does open up children, teenagers to susceptibility to more and further vulnerable illicit activity. Creation of a legacy token such as a manifesto. Jake, something I think would be very interesting on the next podcast to talk about the number of school shooters that had a manifesto or a dossier that they built on targeting profiles. Number 5, pre-attack staging in secluded location to physically and mentally prepare for the attack. Jake, I think that's another thing that we should dive into, is the number of school shooters in that 244 shootings since 99, 98 that pre-staged weapons and other things that they used. I think that'd be a great thing to discuss for our listeners next time as well. The inability to perceive or lack interest in pursuing nonviolent resolutions. This is going to be really important when we talk about school intervention and how that's been documented. Number 7, significantly diminished resiliency or compromised ability to cope with stressors. It's very important. This is a pre-incident indicator factor right here that we can pick up on with a student who's being engaged by faculty members or other students day in and day out. Increased isolation, depression, and withdrawal from normally pleasurable activities. Another indicator. Boom, it's right there. It's a potential warning sign. Susie doesn't want to go to band practice anymore. Johnny doesn't want to play football anymore. Johnny got kicked off the football team and made fun of. Johnny, how do you feel about that? Again, this comes into communication, right? This comes into a whole line of what our SAFE program is going to talk about. Decreased performance at school sometimes is a downward spiral. So grades, things like that, right? 2 more here. Contextually inappropriate accumulation or interest in tactical gear and clothing. Listen, I have kids that are around what I do, and I know you guys all do as well. I mean, we can't be in the business we're in the life we're in, preserving freedom and liberty and doing the things we do without our kids seeing us put a weapon on every day. Training, education, understanding, and then security of those assets, if you're not training your kids on how to be around it, is imperative. I will always agree with that. And there are some people that just shouldn't have guns. There are just some people that they're not mature enough. They're not, I'm totally in support of the Second Amendment. I'm totally in support of liberty and the right to bear arms and all that. But as a law enforcement officer, I'll tell you that there's some people that just shouldn't have a firearm. Last but not least, and this is probably one of the most imperative things for me as a warning sign, is diminished fear of death. Just as the last thing to die, the last thing to die is hope. The first thing to go before someone's willing to really go out is fear. They lose that fear of death, and they justify it through an ideological behavior system where they say, I am going to a better place. I am going to be notably recognized. This is my manifesto. This is why I'm doing this. There is a build up to convince themselves of that. There is a breakdown that occurs systematically you can observe it if you know what you're looking for, which is what we're going to talk about here in about 10, 15 minutes after I let you guys, Nate, Rocco, I'd love, Natasha, you guys to kind of just tap into everything I just said. I know it's a lot, but
it's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to wrap your head around with those statistics. I mean, I think that the biggest thing we're trying to drive home here is everyone wants to scream gun control, mental health, but the problem is you can't reduce it to just simply yelling that out. There, in everything that Steve has said, there are warning signs where someone needs to intervene. But here's my question. What do you do? What do you do if you intervene and someone's resistant to the help? We're talking about, you said 95% of the school shooters were students at the schools. That means they know the schools inside and out. And I think this is an issue schools have. They want to think of predators coming from the outside and, well, we'll lock the doors and we'll do this. If you have a gap where your school if someone can go through the office and go through a lunchroom and get to a hallway without being buzzed in, the shooter knows that. They know that. They've prepared for that. So you've got to think like someone coming from the inside. So like insider threat mentality, right? But that I'm getting, we can go so many different directions. But my point being, you've got to have someone there to intervene. But then what do you do in the event the person's not receptive? They're expelled. Then what?
Yeah. And I think, for that perspective, we keep talking about the pre-indicators and the statistics of these pre-indicators. And I think, right now, who fits that, across America? Like how many kids actually fits that? And this is a statistic that really, when do they fall into that category? And just to try to mitigate what we've got going here, I think on the pre-existing the indicators that we've just discussed, there has to be, once again, an outlet for somebody to reach out and get help. And I don't think that exists yet. And to follow your point, Natasha, yes, as a politician, they just say, hey, more gun control and less, and mental illness. That's their cop out. And then we get another shooting 3 months and then they say the same damn thing. Like it's every time. They don't
circle of.
Meanwhile, you've got hundreds of millions of parents across our country that don't even want to take their kids to school because this is an epidemic at the end of the day right now. It's increasing every decade. It's increasing every year to where, okay, what is the short answer, right? And I do think, security measures right now, let's regress on, hey, what do we do once we get these indicators, and then what do we do with that information? But right now, what do we do today? And I do believe it is more security for now as a band-aid for this problem. I do believe it is a combination between uniformed officers in the school as a deterrent and folks that are not uniformed but are armed there to protect the kids, right? As a backup, I believe one is none, two is one, as we would say in the military. And I think to fund that, with property taxes in counties and parishes, whatever the case may be, like I'm willing to pay an extra $2 a month on my property taxes, or go around a pothole that wouldn't have gotten fixed to have more security in my public schools, right?
1,000%.
Yeah. And so this is what's not happening. Like there is no allocation of funds, and when there is, oh hey, we got $100 million going into school security. Where the hell is that actually going?
That's a great question, Nate.
I mean,
And
no one knows. There's a bill that's just out there. I mean, is it going to doors, locks? Is it going to somebody's company to refurbish a school? Like, I have no idea where that's going. It sure in the hell is not. I don't see a better security presence.
Nate, I want to bring this up though. And Vince, I wonder if you've heard this too. I just talked to a friend of mine yesterday and she goes, yeah, but I don't want my child going to a school that looks like a prison. And I said, you know what? I don't care. Like if it keeps my kid alive and breathing at the end of the day, Israel, I think I read a statistic where Israel has had one school shooting since the 70s because they post armed guards up at the school. Shooters know they're not getting in without a fight.
Yeah, but we let our kids go to school for 2 years wearing masks and be barricades with glass shields.
And we go to banks. We protect our money with armed guards. We protect money, and we go to sporting venues, and we don't mind the presence there. But when it comes to protecting our kids see it everywhere, anyways.
I listen. I love and respect everyone's passion here for this, but Israel is so good at mitigating this threat because they have the best behavioral detection programs in the world, and their people are conditioned for the pre-incident indicators. Their people are conditioned, their law enforcement, their military, their intelligence services, they're conditioned to collect behavioral anomalies to drive intelligence that drives mitigation. Just like we say, for the three of us that have been kinetic in our careers, and had to get on an X or off the X, Intel drives operations, right? It puts us there. Intel drives mitigation as well. Intel is data. Data is something we can use it's something that we can use to grow our threat detection and anomaly databases, to look at future incidences and then maybe get in front of them before they happen. Listen, out of 244 shootings since 1998 in the schools, there's nothing that hasn't happened, right? There's not a tactic or a methodology or a breakdown that probably hasn't occurred in some fashion, way, shape, or form. But how do we analyze that if we're not collecting that data historically and then using that data on the lowest denominator with the lowest end user to help them understand that you just went into let's just get out of the kill chain for a minute, right? And the kill chain, for everybody that doesn't understand that, that's the moment the shooting starts to the moment that it ends. And a lot of people, I have to be very careful how I use that in certain corporate settings and right. But we call that the kill chain. And somebody brought that up to me yesterday and I hadn't heard it used in a while. And I'm just going to start using it again because it's the reality, right? The moment the first shot from a suspect rings out, the kill chain has begun. And the kill chain ends the moment that a good guy or ultimately the bad guy decides to make himself the end of the kill chain and take his own life or her own life. So it's really, really important that we talk about that. The kill chain gets initiated. We're not going to stop every actor from initiating the kill chain. Okay. We're not going to be able to do that. That's not what we're trying to do. What we are trying to do is put a statistical advantage using data and behavioral anomaly and threat detection to mitigate. Now, the North Group is working on a program called SAFE. And I got to give credit to one of our guys who's not on here, does a lot of work with the North Group, but at our strategic planning summit for the year back in December, he came up with this idea, and he's just an amazing guy. And he gave us this idea, and we've been running with it here. So shout out to you, Ray. You know who you are. But your idea has grown some serious legs, and we've gone and we've pushed legislation with the state of Michigan. We've got 7 other state legislators, law enforcement agencies on board with this idea of building situational awareness training for everyone, an 8-hour course. But we're actually looking at
school faculty,
faculty. Yeah, sorry. But furthermore, what we're trying to do is create also a database within that system that administrators can utilize And we're, again, very exploration, right? I'd love to hear from people that want this or think it's a good idea, or think it's a bad idea, say, hey, you guys suck, don't do it, whatever. We'll take your criticism and either throw it in the garbage or bask in it. I don't know. But here's the thing. What I know in my heart, out of all the experience that I have and all experience that this wonderful team that we have and the 70 plus employees we have at the North Group today, is the culture of what we're trying to do and mitigate hasn't worked. It's not fully mitigating the threat, because I don't think that we're conditioning our faculty, our staff, our students that, listen, the world is dangerous. We're just more Is the world more dangerous than it was 25 years ago? I don't know. I say no. Some people say yes. I say no from the individual kind of personal level. I feel like we're more connected today than we used to be, which kind of does bring up the danger threshold. But I also feel like, why the heck not use that to our advantage?
Right.
There's so much AI software data. So one of the things we're doing with our cyber partners, you know who you are and you're amazing, and we love you guys down in Florida, is we are looking at building a database that allows the faculty to go in and track behavioral anomaly detection, as well as being trained on what to look for through our 8-hour course, as well as being able to, now the moment that student or that individual goes from, I'm going to use a counterterrorism term right here, goes from radical to operational, right? Now law enforcement has immediate access to that data. Every incident that's been documented and recorded, family history. I mean, like, I think that's one of the things, and I'm going to let the two former law enforcement guys talk on this, because I want them to come at it as in, I'm the school administrator and I have this data. You're showing up because you've been advised that there may be an issue. You know, how would that help? How would that help the response? I think it was a CBP officer that put this shooter down at this last one a few days ago, right? So what does that look like, Rocco, Nate? I mean,
that was an off-duty Border Patrol agent, BORTAC member. He was in the area, heard the shots. He put on his gear that he had in his vehicle and went to work. So,
guy's a hero. Guy's a hero. Kudos to him.
Hero.
No, that's
and he got a graze across his head. Got some. I mean, he's got several close calls. I believe he was hit 3 times, but right through the hat. You know, so incredible. I mean, incredible to see someone just show up and just go. Hey, there's a list of things like we're talking about. I feel like we keep missing, or I want to mention. Is that cool? Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
One of the things you talk about is notoriety. I think we report on these incorrectly. I don't think we should ever name the shooter or put a picture of the shooter, giving notoriety to someone who doesn't deserve it. And there's no need for it, not necessary. For some reason, the media wants to give them a highlight. That highlight is giving others who have no voice or alienates themselves or wants that attention. It's like, oh, here's what I need to do to get the notoriety. So part of your reports that you have with statistics, the notoriety is one of them. That's one way we can get away from that. Stop posting their names and their pictures. They don't exist.
Dirtbag 37. Like we just Dirtbag 37, right? Like that's his hashtag.
I would have read that as a news anchor.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. Defame them, and they don't exist. That's right.
Exactly. Next is, our schools still teach first aid, CPR. They don't teach stop the bleeding. In any event of shootings, from law enforcement to military, people die from bleeding out more often. Now, some shots, some injuries you cannot sustain. It's just impossible. But a good majority of basic stop the bleeding medical tactics can save a lot of lives. Our schools are not willing to teach that. They still teach CPR. I would willing to bet the odds on how many times CPR has ever been used on any kid from elementary all the way up through high school is almost none. We should be using a stop the bleed techniques for our schools. So then once the event happens, more people can get involved and start helping in that aspect. Social media. Why can't social media be controlled by the school? Why can't, if they're a minor, why wouldn't the school be able to have access to all social media? And if they have access to all social media, maybe at that point we can integrate some kind of some kind of app or something that can identify specific threats and words, right? And then the other thing, I know some schools have clear bags, make the kids wear clear bags. I wouldn't care if my kids had clear bags. You have nothing to hide, as well as metal detectors. I grew up in LA. There was metal detectors. You know what I mean? There was
That's so
gangbangers.
basic. Why don't we have that?
Very, very basic. And that would stop the internal threat, at least give you an ideology of it. And the internal threat is being identified early on beforehand. But again, those are very minimal things we can do that can kind of help in the whole scenario. But those are just some of the notes I've taken off of your notes.
Vince, I want to piggyback off that. And I don't want to hear the argument, well, I don't want my kid having to walk through a metal detector. Do you take them on a plane? They do it there. I like, these are simple things that could prevent. I just don't understand why they're not happening.
Why don't we create safe schools? Just build one school in your city that's considered a safe school that has all these things, and see how many people want their kids in that. It'll fill up to the brim. I guarantee it. Create safe school. That safe school has all these parameters to go to that school. It's private, fine. It'll have all these safety measures. My kid will go there guaranteed.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Nate, go on.
No, the one thing that I've been saying for absolutely years is I think and I say this after every school shooting, is we're at the point, I believe, when you're looking at how the Israelis adjust and they adapt to kind of an enemy tactic or technique, and they're always adjusting to make their country safer, and they have to. I think we're at that point right now with school shootings, and I've said this for years now. I've said this on other podcasts as well, is I believe we should start integrating the administration of law enforcement into high schools, meaning that the deputies and police officers, and this is a two-pronged approach, the deputies and police officers, when they go to work for briefing, they walk through the high school every day. They go to briefing and they come back out. Their police cars are parked there. I'm not talking about jails or booking, right? Those are off-site to where there won't be a kid that ever sees a criminal anywhere near there. But I think, listen, our children are our most important asset of humanity. That is our next generation that is taking this world in their hands and doing whatever with it, right? And we've got police stations, substations miles down the road from there. Every substation that a police department or sheriff's department has should be in a school, period. Like it should. And once again, like that is protecting, like that's what I would want as a parent. That's what I do want as a parent. And then guess what? The culture of how would you say, demonizing the police. When these kids grow up from the elementary school and they see, Deputy Bob or Deputy Karen, you know what I'm saying? Walking through or Officer, Amy walking through the schools for years. They're not a pig anymore. They're not, F the police, F this, like they now know who those folks are. 99.9% of law enforcement are the most amazing people in the world, the most honest and amazing people in the world. It's the media, it's the games, it's the music right now that defames and demonizes the police, which have the kids grow up with them, for Christ's sake, right? But I think we're there. And then just to another point is, I think we're waiting for the government as parents. I think we're waiting for the government to do something, right? And that is our downfall right now, shooting after shooting. I think it is time, if there's any issue that's on the table, the voice of the people, we need to figure this out as citizens of the United States of America and not wait on our government officials to take, because it's not happening. It is just not happening. They're not doing a damn thing. And that's all I've got. And I don't know how many active shooters, Jake, I don't know how many active shooters we've had in a police station or sheriff's office in the last 30 years, but I'd love to hear that statistic too, because that's what they would be up against in a school shooting if the sheriff's or police department was attached to them, right?
That's gorgeous. That'd be interesting.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's genius.
Well, and I think with that, and Steve, you're on mute here. I don't know but I think with that, like, maybe we get federal grant money to start moving those over to the police stations. The next police station in America that is getting ready to move, they move in. They're part of the school now. I'm pretty sure we could figure that out.
I think you're spot on, sir, because I think that's genius. And I know we've talked about this before. I wanna bring up this map that I'm looking at right now, just for our listeners that are watching this, that are able to see it. So can you guys see that?
No, not yet.
Open system preferences. Here we go. Okay, screen sharing. Oh man. Oh, here we go. Hold on one second. Bear with me. So, really important.
Steve fell off right now. I'm not sure if he pushed the wrong button, but
Yeah.
we'll move forward until then. And Tosh, hi. So Steve fell off. Here we go. Let me put him back in right now. Here he is.
Okay.
Yeah. So technical difficulties. Sorry about that. I completely left. So here we go. I've got this now. So really, really important. Just kind of little caveat here. Let me open this up separate from you guys, and we are there. I'm sharing this. So real quick, really important. Can you guys see that now?
No, let me put it up here. So hold on. All right.
There it is. We got it.
Okay, so really important, just to kind of full spectrum look at this. These are the 244 incidences that well, actually, I'm sorry. These ones are only from 2010 to today, I believe.
Active shootings. Is that what is this? What are we looking at?
These are active shooter incidences across the country at schools since 2010. Is that right, Jake?
Yes, minus the Texas one's not on there yet.
Okay, so, but let's go to. No, let's not go to that one. Let's go to. Is Oxford on here?
Yeah, it's at the very bottom. They're all chronological, so it'll be down there. It's second to the bottom.
There it is. Okay, so let's look at that one. That one's right in our backyard, right? Right here, we had another one here, Fowlerville, no wounded, officer involved. We've got a pretty good. That looks like it was a pretty good save, if you will. Just kind of looking here again, 2016. We're starting to try to document this just so we can better collect data and understand internally how this is working, right? But if you start to look at some of these incidences, let's go back up here to Oxford. This one hit home. Had some people that were directly connected to this one. Definitely knew some responding officers and agencies and what have you. 7 people, including a teacher, were injured and 4 died. And there's a lot. Now let's zoom out. Let's look at this. And California's really got them. I don't know if it's just because California is so darn big, but this map is telling, and like we're probably only capturing 70-60% of what's out there, and that's stuff that's being reported in ERC and things like that, and being tracked. Solutions, right? I want to take the time. Circus, you have an amazing solution, and I am fully behind that. I think the federal government should get behind that one. But solutions, spending, $40 billion, $50 billion, 20 billion. I don't know what the number is. And again, I just want to add that I wasn't thinking that we shouldn't help Ukraine, but there's a lot of political arguments right now on, we should be doing stuff at the border. We should be doing. Listen, these kids are our future. They are our future. They are the future of legacy. Legacy is future. They are everything to us. I mean, me personally, it breaks my heart. And I talked about this on a podcast before. I don't get upset about the number of people that were hurt. I think about the parents sitting at their dinner table that those following nights, looking at that chair where my little 4-year-old Rowan sits, who's so happy and joyful, and he's like the light of my life. Every time I sit down with him, he's got a story for me. I think what that's like as a parent, and I can have my heart break over it. I can get emotional. I have gotten emotional. I've literally broke down for those parents because I just know what that's like. I've seen it and I've felt it, as have those of you that have been in this career long enough. I feel like I don't care if we mitigate one life or 1,000 lives. And those of you that have worked with me long enough know my philosophy is you could save one person, that person may go on to cure cancer. We don't know what the good Lord has in store for them. We can't sit here and figure that out on our own. But what we can do is work towards the common good of coming up with policy, tactics, techniques, procedures, and programs that can better mitigate, and solutions, right? Spending, coming up with programs where money, fiscal dollars, and appropriations can be spent to, we believe that SAFE is going to be one of those things. Training through SAFE, through situational awareness for everyone, is going to be one of those things. Data aggregation, and the ability to collect behavioral anomaly so that we can get out in front of those pre-incident indicators. And then ultimately working with law enforcement when that behavioral subject becomes a threat, or there's indicators to support that he's crossed a threshold, a legal threshold, to now have law enforcement engagement. And SRO liaison is the last thing, right? The SRO has to be the liaison between the district and the law enforcement connectivity. There are amazing school resource officers out there. Those people, to me, are saints. They go to schools every day and deal with dumb questions and kids and monotony. But the school resource officers have been known to save lives because they've been on premise when something's happened. And I'll open it up to you, Circus.
Yeah, no, I just think between the discovery of kind of the pre-existing indicators and law enforcement, there needs to be a social component in there, right? Because I mean, as a parent, I don't want to just call the cops on my kid that's acting a little weird, right? But I do need an outlet to say, hey, I need a counsel. I need somebody to intervene here. And I think and I don't want to be, because look, I came from kind of a broken home and literally am living in a broken home with my kids right now to an extent, with, divorce and the whole 9 years. And I think a lot of this is a lack, and the increase in this is the increase in kind of that, I guess, the decrease in family values and that family unit, right? Where kids are kind of growing up on their own. They don't have guidance. They don't have, role models in their life, to where I think that society needs, and then they're just going to school and getting kicked down even further, to where when you're looking, and the one thing that really resonated with me, and one of the biggest factors that each one of these shooters had, was revenge, right? Revenge against who? I mean, that's the question, right? Is it society as a whole for failing them? Is it revenge that they didn't have, loving parents? I mean, that to me is like, how do we define that? Like, what is revenge? Does it, hey, I've been bullied and made fun of, and I do think a lot of this is victims of bullying. And I don't want to say that anybody. I'm not one of those folks to say, hey, a shooter, somebody that goes in and murders kids, was a victim by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think with their, and I'm not going to say mental illness, but the depression and the lack of guidance, that void has to be filled some way. And I think it's somewhere between the school system and law enforcement, to where I feel comfortable as a parent saying, hey, my kid needs some help. Or I could be a grandparent, I could be an uncle, I could be a friend's mom, I don't care. But hey, this kid needs some help and some intervention, right? And that to me doesn't exist yet. It really, if it does, I don't know about it. And so that's just kind of where, I think that's a gray area that is just missing in society right now.
Steve, I see your screen. Do you want it on the screen or not?
No.
Okay. I'm going to kick that from the studio. Oh, no. There you go. It's gone. Okay.
So yeah, go on, Rocco.
No, Nate, I 100% agree. That's exactly what I was saying earlier. There is no kind of that middle space of the in-between of just having the conversation, starting it, and maybe identifying something really early. Our school is really cool. We're in a private school. My son wasn't getting dressed for freaking PE for some reason. So I started thinking maybe bullying issues or, the 13-year-old age of weird puberty stuff, right? So I called the school, and the principal said, hey, Vince, I'll head over there and talk to him. And that was huge for us. Like, that was a very valuable thing that the principal went up and talked to him, and they had a discussion. But, there's some schools that are so big. When I grew up, I graduated with class. I think my senior class was like 500 students or something. It was crazy, like huge school. And so luckily the small school gives a more intimate feel and has a better, I guess, relationship with the kids. Some of these schools are so big that, it's easy to be forgotten, to be misplaced, to be not even acknowledged in these giant schools that are just filling seats. 45 kids in one class is crazy. And that's how it was when I was growing up.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And sometimes it's money, it's taxpayers' dollars, and that's what it is. There's not enough teachers, there's not enough facilities, and I kind of get that. But once again, I do think there can be, and I think it's the training to identify it, what to do with the SAFE program that the North Group is launching. I think it's just the ability to recognize that, and then have an outlet once again that I can go to that isn't necessarily the SRO or the school resource officer and or law enforcement. It's that in between, to where maybe we do have very, very professional counselors in the schools that maybe now they start to have a little bit of bleed off with law enforcement, and then go from there.
The social worker certification would probably be a great one to have in every school. Social workers can kind of be the in-between of all of that. That might be a good option. A higher level of student counselor, right?
Absolutely.
Tosh, what do you think?
You'd think I'd know better than to talk with the mic muted. Okay, so my head just keeps coming back to the fact that we have to have these conversations, and I'm hearing choppers overhead. So if you see me looking down, this is how heightened I am right now as a parent. I'm like, oh my God, I got to check to make sure that nothing's happening at the school or in my area. And I think where I'd like to just get an opinion here for people listening that have children, I have open conversations with my kids, and some of my friends don't agree with me because they say, don't scare your kids. But I think knowledge is power. So I just kind of like to weigh in and see, I've always believed you call things by terminology. You don't sugarcoat it. A dragon that breathes fire is not coming into the classroom. No, it's a bad person with a weapon that could hurt you. I believe in labeling things properly, with body parts, everything, like everything, they have to have the knowledge. So I would ask you guys, what do you tell your kids? Okay. So how do you give them something that can help them in a scenario like Texas? And I'm talking young. I have a 5-year-old. What do you say to arm them with knowledge to help save their own lives?
Yeah, I'll start with that if you don't mind, Nate. That's a tough one for me personally. I mean, we're all going to probably have our own different opinion on how we would do that. I have an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, but I personally know that he can't handle some of the things. It would terrify him. He wouldn't want to go to school anymore. And so I kind of manage that conversation very different. And at the same time, if they're younger than that, man, I have a lot more trust and hope into the school are going to be doing something that's going to be protecting my kids, because at that age, I don't think I can tell a 5-year-old to like, hey, find something with cover, concealment. And you know what I mean? I don't know if they'll ever really acknowledge that. And so for my kids right now, my school age kids, I have a 9-year-old, I have 13-year-olds, and I have a 16-year-old. And so they all have a slightly different conversation. The 16-year-old gets it all. I tell her there is no rules. When that happens, there is no rules. The rule is for you to get away. Is if there's a window, you break it. They say, what are you doing? I'm doing what I do. You know what I mean? Because in our world, I tell her distance creates a better safety net for you, because accuracy in firearms gets harder and harder the farther you get. And so for us, it is the run, hide, fight mentality. If you can run, run. If you can hide, you better hide and understand the difference between concealment and cover, right? What can defend against, right? And then the last is going to be, you might have to fight, right? And so that's the Department of Homeland Security kind of broken it down to. And those, I do like those in a sense, in depending on every situation dictates differently. But my 13-year-olds, I can tell them pretty similar, but I don't give them the harshness of it. I just say, you need to make sure that you do this, this, this. And so every family is going to have to take into consideration how to communicate with each kid and how they handle information. And my 9-year-old doesn't handle that kind of information very well. And so that's kind of a softer subject. And I really don't know how to dabble around him, because I don't want him to also lose his innocence and fear of going to school.
Yeah, and that's right. And for me, it's like you've got different laws that are in place throughout different states, throughout different counties, in different school systems, to where, hey, we're mandated to make sure you get 3 square meals a day, right? Because it's a public school. We're mandated to make sure that you can make it here if you live so many miles outside with the bus system. How about make sure my kid doesn't get shot? You know what I'm saying? Like literally, how about throwing that in there every now and then, to where the kids don't have to worry about going to school? Like, we're there to protect them as adults. And it dumbfounds me, like literally, how many times this happens and how quickly people forget that this just happened until it happens again. And it's a smaller amount of time. It seems like every time. And then you get the folks that can make change, the elected officials that are like, yeah, it's about gun control and mental illness, and then it's gone, and it's just ridiculous, to say the least, because nothing has happened, nothing. And I don't think a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old should be worried about going to school and getting shot. I don't. I think we should. We are at a point with technology, and I mean, we are a one of the most powerful nations in the world, and we cannot protect our kids from getting shot at a school. I think that maybe more of our taxpayers' money need to go towards that than a lot of different other fundings, throughout the cities, the counties. Like I said, I don't care if I have to go around a pothole if my kid's safe at school with armed security, right?
Well, Nate, it just goes back to the whole premise that we talk about almost in every podcast. If you are not physically safe, nothing else matters. So you have to spend the money on security. And I'm not saying that because I'm in the sector, right? I was a news person. I've preached this my whole life. Security is first. It has to be prioritized. You cannot wait to spend the money post-incident. You have to spend it pre-incident to prevent the incident from ever happening. It's across the board. It's what we say to corporations. We need to really drive home this message to schools as well, especially when it comes to, as we've all said, the most precious thing in our lives, our kids, the youth. It is society's most precious gem. This is where we have to spend the money. Steve, do you want to weigh in on what you tell your kids?
Yeah, well, obviously, I have a 4-year-old, and he's already a little savage. So, you know, he's still got training wheels on with this, but I'm working that. I'm building that mindset. You know, to me, it's with my kids, it's about mindset. Like I said, you know, they've been around weapons and training and in my ideology and seen me doing what I do. My 12-year-old, you know, he deals with his own struggles from his upbringing and things to do. You know, I mean, I've done everything to protect that little boy, but more importantly, build his mindset. Like, you know, I've had more counter active shooter conversations than I've had, you know, anything around like, you know, how do you feel? Because he's kind of like, every time I'm like, how do you feel about it? He's like, Dad, I'm good. Like, this is my plan. This is what I'm going to do. You know, he understands cover, move, concealment, the whole concept, right? My kid also is trained in some level of tactics. Um, you know, we've talked about tourniquet applications. We've talked about stop the bleed. The whole concept is keep the blood in the body. If you see somebody hurt, doesn't matter if dad cuts his leg with a chainsaw being dumb, or if we roll the side by side, or if we see an accident, the concept of an injury is to keep the blood in the body, and keep the patient breathing, right? That's what we've all strived for. Um, I got two brilliant tactical medical, you know, experienced guys here with TAC medicine. So, you know, you guys both understand that. I mean, that's my big thing. There are limitations there. The big thing with my kid is I talk to him about if you're at a friend's house and somebody brings out a weapon, what do you do? You know, if it's getting bad, like in their pointing at like leave, right? Get as many people as you can, grab and go. This is a scenario because I was faced with this as a kid. And my parents kind of hid me from weapons, and it's led me down a road of having too many of them now, I think. But you know, it's kind of one of those things where there's a conditioning that occurs and a assimilation to a culture that occurs to where, you know, safe firearms practice, you know what bad looks like, you know what weird looks like, you know what adverse actor behavior looks like, you know what a motivated, ill-motivated individual's behavior looks like. We have those conversations. We have conversations about what to say. We have conversations about closing distance always. I'm big into teaching my kids to be close to a problem versus afar. But again, my kids know how to handle themselves. They always will, whether it's with a weapon or it's with their body language, it's with their behavior. Distance kills, right? Distance kills. If you're trained and you're able, it's always good to close distance. And, you know, I talk to my kids granularly. I don't talk to them big picture yet. Eventually I will, policy, you know, bigger picture, active shooter mitigation, things like that. But right now it's just on their level where they're going to be engaged at. We have two things. It's run or fight. Hide to me does not work in a school. Unless everything's
That's what I
ballistic.
say to my kids.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, this is gonna sound horrible, but I know for a fact that my kid's gonna try to be a hero. Because that's his heart. His heart is to help people. My 12-year-old and even my 4-year-old has that same, he already has that warrior spirit. Those of you that know him, like, built into him. Like, he's conditioned there.
I call that a servant's heart.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, as a dad, do I want to further instill that? Do I want to see my kids go off to war and do the stuff that we've done? And not really, but I'm also not going to fight that. I'm going to inspire that warrior's heart in my kids to know that there's evil in the world, and whether it's active shooter mitigation, whether it's opportunistic crime, whether it's a carjacking, whatever it is, right? My biggest fear as a parent is I am somewhere in the world protecting someone else and not here protecting my kid, and something happens. I don't know how I would live with that. I've gone around the world protecting, people, the wealthy, the popular, the celebrities, whatever. I'm off doing that. I'm off doing a project, and my kid's in danger. Like, I struggle with that. I struggle with every time being gone. And I know this hits home for a couple of you. Actually, I know it hits home for Rocco and Circus. Both of you have been gone and had adversity back home, issues back home, and you're doing greater good, and you've dedicated a life. We talked about this before on another podcast, but it's like, that's hard for me. So what do? I make sure my kids understand what wrong and bad look like, and then how to react to that within their capability threshold. Now, that capability threshold will grow. They will become boys. They will become men. I've got a 12-year-old going on 20, right? He is a big 12-year-old. I mean, he could fight most men if he wanted to, and probably get the crap handed to him. But he would put up a fight. I mean, if you tell him to put his hands up, he'll fight you. And my thing for him, and what I told him the other morning when I was dropping him off at school, is don't be a hero. We started talking about, I said, listen, man, just don't be a hero. Always look for your exits. Always look for as many people to take with you. And I'll tell you, man, that's heading north. And him and I have a saying: head north. Head north, get to the wood line. I mean, we've walked around his school. We've been around. He knows where to go. We have a plan. He knows when he exits that building, he can go south towards home, north towards the neighborhood. And there's safe places there.
Hey, Jake, you've been awfully quiet. So I want to bring you in here because you are a young parent. And I could only imagine what's going through your head as we have all of these conversations and you wrap yourself around the idea that someday your little baby is going to be in these situations. I mean, like the totality of it all, what are you thinking right now?
I'm seriously considering homeschooling, honestly. Not even kidding. I mean, really.
Yeah.
I mean, just because, we've seen this stuff evolve, and people keep trying to do things. They keep trying, and it's the same result. So, but it really feels like everything that's been done, it's all kind of just been the same. You know what I mean? It's just, I don't feel like anybody has really made a conscious effort to do anything that would actually make a difference. It's just a lot of whatever it could be. I'm not even going to go down that road, but it's frustrating to say the least.
It's just the cycle, the revolving
I struggle
circle.
with that. I struggle with that too. I want my kids to still enjoy themselves. I want them to have the social life, the sports, and everything that I look forward to. And so I kind of play between the two. But when they start feeling unsafe to go to school, well, then they don't have to go to school. We can do it homeschool. So I let each one of those kids choose on their own. I had one daughter during COVID who was like, I don't want to go to school. She stayed home for a year and did homeschool. So again, I'll allow them to tell me how psychologically they feel. If they feel safe enough to go, then we go. If they don't, then we stay home.
So I want to kind of, we're at an hour and 20 minutes here. So kind of wrapping this podcast up, we wanted to give some of our ideas for solutions. And again, we are actively here at the North Group working on what we believe would be a great solution, which is a module that really drives home teaching staff and faculty how to recognize those PINs, pre-incident indicators, so that they can recognize them. And then we're also having conversations about what next, right? They have the database they can use and go to. We are trying to come up with a solution. As Steve said, we have had conversations with lawmakers. We are not just a security guard staffing company. We have our hands in solutions because here at the North Group, and I know it sounds cheesy, we really do want and believe we want to make the world a better, safer place. And this is part of it, right? To have these open conversations. So would love to hear your feedback. Would love to hear your ideas and thoughts on everything. Would love to hear what you say to your children at night. All of the above. And of course, I'm going to open it up to closing thoughts here before we go. But I just kind of wanted to give a wrap really quickly, just being cognizant of the time.
Yeah, and the only thing I have is let's not wait on the speed of government. Let's as parents do something and get something across the goal line to save our
That
kids.
is important.
Yeah, I have meetings with the Attorney General here in Utah and a couple of the mayors, and we're going to start trying to see if we can implement something just to start the safety of our families and, continue on with that. I think everyone should get involved in that. I mean, even if you just volunteer as a body and not have to have a weapon on, just an extra body on the premises is still
Just walking the campus.
someone has the ability to fight. The more
Yep.
people that can volunteer time is still going to keep our kids safer.
Well, and I think now is the time to go after the policymakers and talk about this SAFE program, talk about situational awareness for everyone to be on the same page. Because I'm telling you, like we can have building conversations, all stuff, and we'll do another podcast here in a week or two on this and further open this up. You know what I would like to do is I would like to do a mass webinar on this.
Let's do it. And let's do it.
I would like
Q&A
to,
style live.
yeah, I would like to bring people in. I would like to bring opinions in. I would like to bring in the thoughts of administrators, parents, law enforcement. I would like to do that. I think that it would be great. I think it would be great to get a documented kind of opinion, conversation, questions, like what can I do with my district? What can I do here? Mind you, we've assessed thousands of schools at the North Group. We have a tenure of doing this for a long time. We had an acquisition years ago where we brought in another company that had done this for years beyond us. We have some of the best risk management folks. Like, I want to give back to the community. I want people to feel safe. This is not a for-profit thing for us. Obviously, some of the things that we're designing and building are going to be sold to certain, technology components, right? Will be sold to districts and stuff. But if you're a superintendent, if you're a concerned parent, info@tngdefense.com, or just me personally, Steve@tngdefense.com. 844-750-9222 is our office number. Reach out, talk to us. Our life goal is people to feel safe. So that's a wrap on my end. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time. You guys are all amazing. Happy Memorial Day weekend. God bless our brothers and sisters, and be safe.